Assalamu alaikum everyone. We are going to continue with the composition of PDL today. In the last lecture, we talked about mainly what PDL, the periodontal ligament, is, how it is defined, what is the composition of the periodontal ligament. Then we were talking about the cells of the periodontal ligament. By composition, periodontal ligament, as it is a soft connective tissue, it entirely consists of an extracellular compartment made up of the non-collagenous matrix proteins consisting of gags, proteoglycans, glycoproteins, glycolipids, fibronectin, tenacin, and fibers system embedded within it, which consists of collagen fibrils, type 1, 3, 5, 6, 4, 8, 12, and oxytocin fibers, along with reticulin and elastin fibers. Within this extracellular compartment, a vast majority of cellular community was embedded, and those cells majorly consist of the fibroblasts, the cementoblasts, the osteoblasts, the fibroclasts, the cementoclasts, the osteoclasts, defense cells, epithelial cell rests of mollases, and undifferentiated mesenchymal cells. The cellular community of the periodontal ligament is classified into the different types of cells according to their function and origin. So the synthetic cell community, we have the synthetic cell community in the cells of the PDL, resorptive cellular community, progenitor cells, epithelial cells, and defense cells. We talked about the synthetic cells, which were the fibroblasts, osteoblasts, and cementoblasts. The fibroblasts generate these basically are the predominant cells of the PDL, and they generate the collagen of the PDL along with the non-collagenous matrix protein, and they also have the ability to degrade the collagen. Then we had the osteoblasts lining the bone cells, the bone side of the periodontal ligament, and the function of the osteoblast is to obviously secrete the bone. Cementoblasts were lining the cementum side of the periodontal ligament, and obviously, as the name says, this to produce the cementum matrix. Then we had the resorptive cells consisting of fibroclasts, which degrade the collagen with the help of phagocytosis and certain collagenases. Then we had the osteoclasts remodeling the alveolar bone, and cementoclasts remodeling the cementum. The progenitor cells, which were the stem cells and the undifferentiated mesenchymal cells, basically can differentiate into any type of cell, from fibroblast to osteoblast to cementoblast, depending upon the stimulus, or there could be separate cell lines for each of these cells. So these cells basically were the source of new cells within the PDL, and these progenitor cells or the stem cells basically also maintain the balance between the new and the old cells within the periodontal ligament, because there's apoptosis going on within the periodontal ligament as well, which basically helps in the maintenance of the new and the old cells. Then we had the cells of epithelial origin within the periodontal ligament, which were the remnants of the Hertwig epithelial root sheath, the cuboidal shaped cluster of epithelial rest cells surrounded by basal lamina called the epithelial cell rests of mollases, and they function in the repair and the regeneration of the periodontal ligament. Then we had certain defense cells, the mast cells, the macrophages, the eosinophils, and today we are going to talk about these defense cells in detail, their morphology and their functions. The defense cells, starting with the mast cells, they consist of the mast cells, eosinophils, and macrophages within the periodontal ligament. Mast cells basically within the periodontal ligament are small round oval cells with a diameter of about 12 to 15 micrometers. The mast cells are associated with blood vessels, and they look like this. Sorry, let me get a pointer. Okay. Can you see the pointer? No, I think you won't be able to see the pointer. Let me get a highlighter bit. That's better. Let's change the color of the highlighter. I'm sorry guys, I have to change the color because it is quite light. Okay, so this is how the mast cells look like. You have small round to oval cells with varying diameter from about 12 to 15 micrometers. They are associated with blood vessels. These cells basically are characterized by having numerous cytoplasmic granules, and they do have other organelles, however, within their cytoplasm, but those organelles are less in number. Mast cells basically have a very important role in combating with the inflammatory reaction within the PDL. And what do they do when the PDL undergoes or suffers with an inflammatory reaction? They basically produce histamine and heparin in response to that antigen antibody reaction. So that is how the mast cells basically act as a defense mechanism for the periodontal ligament in case of inflammation. Then we have macrophages, which look like this. They have a nucleus. They're found in the ligament. They are also located adjacent to blood vessels. They are, however, derived from the blood monocytes. And the function of macrophages is basically phagocytosis of the foreign organisms and foreign particulate matter. So that is how the macrophages defend the periodontal ligament. The macrophages basically phagocytose any invading organism or the foreign matter by phagocytosing that organism or matter. They also synthesize interferons and prostaglandins and factors that enhance the growth of the fibroblast and the endothelial cell growth. So that is how these macrophages are defending or are proved to be defensive for the periodontal ligament that they are found in. The third type of defensive cells present within the periodontal ligament are the eosinophils. These eosinophils are occasionally seen in the normal healthy periodontal ligament, jabki the macrophages and the mast cells more commonly they increase in number in case of inflammations within the PDL. However, the eosinophils are present in a normal periodontal ligament. These cells basically could be binuclear. They could have a bilobed, not basically binuclear, they have a bilobed nucleus. And these cells have lots of granules within their cytoplasm. If you closely see this cytoplasm, there's lots of granules present in it. And these granules basically have are called the peroxisomes. These peroxisomes help the eosinophils in phagocytosis of the invading organism or particulate matter. So basically, peroxisomes is the defense mechanism for the eosinophils because it helps them in the phagocytosis. So this is all about the defense cells found within the periodontal ligament. The mast cells, the eosinophils and the macrophages, all of them are actually helping defend the periodontal ligament against the invading organism or inflammations or disease cases. The next thing that we are going to talk about, we've talked about the cellular community of the periodontal ligament. Now we're going to talk about the extracellular substances or the extracellular compartment of the periodontal ligament. We've already made it clear that the extracellular compartment consists of the ground substance and fibers embedded within it. The ground substance consists of the non-collagenous proteins like glycosaminoglycans, proteoglycans, glycoproteins, tenasins, fibronectin, glycolipids, and then we have numerous fibers embedded within this ground substance, consisting of the collagen fibers, the oxytocin fibers, reticulin fibers, and the elastin fibers. So this is the fiber community that we have within the periodontal ligament. Not only do we have the collagen fibers within the periodontal ligament, but we also have the elastin reticular or reticulin and oxytocin fibers within the periodontal ligament. We are going to individually talk about all of these fibers, their composition and their arrangement within the periodontal ligament. Starting with the major fiber system that we have in the periodontal ligament, and that is the collagen fiber. Collagen fibers basically is the main type of fiber system present within the periodontal ligament, and of these, the main types of collagen found within the periodontal ligament are type 1, 3 and 12. Out of these three types, type 1 is the most abundant. About 70% of the collagen fiber system of the PDL is type 1, and it is uniformly distributed throughout the ligament. However, type 3 is only about 20%. It only constitutes 20% of the collagen fibers, and this type of collagen, type 3, is associated with the rapid turnover of the collagen of the periodontal ligament. However, type 12 is believed to occur only when the periodontal ligament is fully functional. The other types of collagen fibers found within the periodontal ligament which are present in traces are type 5, 6, 4 and 8. So the major types are type 1, which is 70%, type 3, which is 20%, which gives the periodontal ligament a rapid turnover, and type 12, which is present in the fully functional ligament. Within the periodontal ligament, these collagen fibrils do not have the similar diameter as they have in the other fiber bundles of the body, like tendons. Within the collagen fibrils, within the PDL, these collagen fibrils have a very small diameter, and this small diameter basically reflects the short half-life of the periodontal ligament collagen, which means that it has a rapid turnover. Within the periodontal ligament, all of these collagen fibrils are arranged in the form of bundles, and these bundles are termed as the principal fibers of the PDL. So basically, all of the fiber system of the periodontal ligament, major fiber system of the periodontal ligament, is collagen, and that is in the form of principal fibers. So we could say that the periodontal ligament majorly comprises of the principal fibers, and these principal fibers are the collagen fibrils arranged within in the form of bundles basically. Each bundle in the principal fibers basically resembles a spliced rope. If you know what a spliced rope is, or you could say a braided rope where certain strands are braided over each other. Within each rope or each strand or each bundle, the individual strands have the ability to individually be remodeled, while the rest of the bundle maintains its architecture and function. So that is how these bundles are able to adapt to the continual stresses, because their architecture and function does not change. However, the individual strands within the bundle can be remodeled or are remodeling at any time. So that is how the principal fiber bundles help the PDL or give the ability to the PDL to adapt to the continuous stresses that are put on the periodontal ligament. So the major composition of the major fiber system of the periodontal ligament is basically the collagen, in which the major type of collagen is type 1, then we have 3 and type 12. These collagen fibrils have a very small diameter, and they are arranged in the form of bundles called the principal fiber bundles of the periodontal ligament. These principal fiber bundles give the periodontal ligament an ability to adapt to continual stresses put on the PDL. And how is that happening? Because the fiber bundles, the individual strands of collagen within the fiber bundles, can be continuously remodeled while maintaining the architecture of the whole bundle and the function of the whole bundle. So these principal fiber bundles within the PDL are arranged in certain groups, and these groups are about 5 in number, and they are named according to their locations. So the principal fiber bundles of the periodontal ligament are 5 groups of principal fibers, and their names are alveolar crest group, horizontal group, oblique group, apical group, and interradicular group. All of these principal fiber groups are basically collagen. They are made up of collagen fiber bundles grouped in a bundle. So these alveolar, we're going to individually talk about all of these 5 groups of the principal fiber bundles. Starting with the alveolar crest group. As the name says, alveolar crest group attaches on the alveolar bone. Alveolar crest group is attached because all of the fibers of the periodontal ligament, as we know, are attached to cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the other side. ये शुरू से मैं आपको कहानी सुनाती आ रही हूँ कि periodontal ligament के जो fiber bundles हैं, they are embedded into the cementum, the extrinsic fiber system on one side, and the extrinsic fiber system of the primary cementum on one side within the root, and on the other side they attach to the alveolar bone. So these groups, all of these principal fiber groups, the alveolar crest group, the horizontal group, the oblique group, the apical group, the interradicular group, all of these basically are attached to cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the other side. So starting with the alveolar crest group, it is attached to cementum just below the cemento-enamel junction, and it runs downwards and outwards from there and inserts into the rim of the alveolus or the alveolar crest. So here in this figure, let me get a highlighter. So here this purple colored group is the alveolar crest. The alveolar crest, like any principal fiber, is attached to cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the other side. So it is attached to cementum just below the cemento-enamel junction. This is your cemento-enamel junction. So it is attached to cementum. This purple thing is the alveolar crest. It is attached to cementum on one side just below the alveolar crest, and from there it is running downwards and it is attached to the rim of the alveolar bone, the alveolar crest. So this is your alveolar crest group. The alveolar crest group is attached to cementum just below the cemento-enamel junction on one side, and from there it runs downwards and outwards and inserts into the alveolar crest. And this fiber group system basically ये दोनों sides के ऊपर हो रहा है, इस side पे भी और इस side पे भी, ठीक है, here. So both the alveolar crest group fiber system, every tooth has all of these principal fibers. The alveolar crest group basically resists the forces of tilting on the tooth, the intrusive and extrusive forces on the tooth, and the rotational forces on the tooth. Basically, what is tilting? Tilting is bending of the tooth on one side, mesial or distal or buccal or lingual. So basically these group of fibers prevent the tooth from tilting in any direction. Intrusive forces are the forces that push the tooth within the socket. मतलब कि कोई force जो इस direction में आ रही होगी, जो उसको socket के अंदर push करेगी, that would be an intrusive force. The alveolar crest group prevents these forces. The extrusive forces are forces that pull the tooth out of the socket, extrusive. So the alveolar crest group also resists these forces. The rotational forces would be those that allow the tooth to rotate within the socket or move within the socket. And the alveolar crest group also resist these forces. So the alveolar crest group, these fibers basically resist the tilting, intrusive, extrusive, and the rotational forces on the tooth. Then moving to the second group, the horizontal group. This group is present just apical to the alveolar crest, and it runs at a right angle to the long axis of the tooth from cementum to the bone just below the alveolar crest. So here this pink system is your horizontal fiber system. This is your alveolar crest. It is present right below the alveolar crest, and it is inserted onto cementum on one side, and it runs at a right angle to the long axis of your tooth and is inserted onto the alveolar bone on the other side just below the alveolar crest. These fibers, the horizontal groove fibers, they resist the horizontal and tipping forces on the tooth. Tipping forces would be any force that would tip the tooth in any direction, mesial, distal, buccal, lingual, and also any sort of horizontal forces. So the horizontal group prevents or resists horizontal forces and the tipping forces, and they run at right angle perpendicular to the long axis of the tooth. They're attached to cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the other side, running at right angles to the long axis just below the alveolar crest. The next fiber system is the oblique group. Oblique group basically is the most numerous group present within the periodontal ligament. सबसे ज़्यादा जो fiber system present होता है principal fiber system periodontal ligament में, that is oblique, numerous. The oblique, as the name says, it runs in an oblique direction from cementum onto the alveolar bone. They are attached to cementum on one side and they run upwards in an oblique direction, or coronally you would say, towards the crown, to insert onto the bone. And these basically resist vertical and intrusive forces. So these green bundles that you can see here and on this side as well are the oblique group, and as you can appreciate in the figure, they are the most numerous within the periodontal ligament. They run from cementum on one side to the alveolar bone on the other side. They are attached to the cementum apically, and then they run in an oblique direction coronally, that is towards the crown region, upar ki taraf, to be inserted into the alveolar bone. So we say that they run from cementum in an oblique direction to insert into the alveolar bone coronally. These fibers resist vertical forces on the tooth and intrusive forces on the tooth. Any force in the vertical axis and any sort of force that would force the tooth within the socket, the intrusive forces. The fourth type of principal fiber bundle group is the apical group. The apical group basically radiates from cementum around the apex of the root to be attached to the bone that is forming the base of the socket. So these crystal colored fibers that you can see here, this group, this ice blue group basically is your apical group. It is initiating or radiating from the cementum at the root apex, and then it is inserting into the alveolar bone that forms the base of your socket here. So these are the apical group fibers. They are radiating from the base of the tooth that is at the apex of the root, and they attach to the base of the socket. This is the base of the socket. So these are your apical groups because they are present at the apical region. This group of fiber system resists the forces of luxation. Now what is luxation? Any force that would make the tooth come out of the socket or dislocate the tooth from the socket would be a luxative force. So any sort of luxative force on the tooth is resisted by these apical group. They also prevent the tipping forces on the tooth, whereas there another major function is also to prevent the root from touching the base of the socket. So it maintains a healthy space between the root apex and the socket base, and that is how it prevents or protects the delicate blood vessels and the lymph vessels and the nerves entering the pulp of the tooth and within the periodontal ligament at this region, at the root apex, from collapsing. So the apical group, by preventing the root apex from collapsing with the base of the socket, prevents all sorts of blood vessels, lymph vessels and nerves that are entering and exiting the tooth and are present within the periodontal ligament in this region from collapsing. So this apical group radiates, so as the name says, it is present at the apex of the tooth. It radiates from the base of the tooth, which is the apex of the root, and gets inserted onto the base of the socket. It prevents any sorts of luxative forces on the tooth, prevents tipping of the tooth, and protects the delicate vessels, lymph vessels, blood vessels, and the nerves traversing the periodontal ligament. Then the last type of the principal fiber groups present within the periodontal ligament are the interradicular group. The fifth type is the interradicular group. As the name says, they're only present in the multi-rooted tooth, where we have the interradicular region. Obviously multi-rooted tooth होंगे तो interradicular region होगा, एक से ज़्यादा root होगी तो interradicular region होगा. So this interradicular group is only found between the roots of the multi-rooted teeth, and they run from the cementum in the interradicular region into the bone, forming the crest of the interradicular septum. So this purple thing here, this purple band of groups here, is the interradicular. It originates from the cementum in the interradicular region and gets inserted into the interradicular bone. The interradicular bone is basically the bone separating the two roots, the interradicular septum basically. So this is your interradicular group. This was all about the principal fiber system of the periodontal ligament. The principal fiber system of the periodontal ligament basically makes the major fiber system of the periodontal ligament, and it consists of bundles of collagen fibers. The bundles of collagen fibers forms the principal fibers, and we have 5 groups of fiber system: the alveolar crest group, the oblique group, the horizontal group, the apical group, and the interradicular group. The horizontal the alveolar crest group is present. It runs, all of these fiber system groups are inserted onto the cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the other side. The alveolar crest group is inserted onto the cementum of the root right beneath the cemento-enamel junction, and it radiates from there and it gets inserted into the alveolar crest of the socket. Then we have the horizontal group. It runs horizontally within the periodontal ligament. It is inserted onto the cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the opposite side, and this fiber system or this group is present right below the alveolar crest. Then we have the most abundant ones, the oblique ones, which are running in an oblique direction upwards in the periodontal ligament. They are inserted onto the cementum on one side, and from there they radiate upwards or coronally to be inserted onto the alveolar bone. Then we have the apical fiber, the ones that are inserted that basically originate from the cementum at the base of the root, the apex of the root, and they get inserted onto the base of the socket on the other side. So these are the apical fiber or the apical group. Then we have the interradicular ones that are only present in the multi-rooted teeth, and they run from the cementum in the interradicular region and they get inserted into the interradicular bone here, the bone basically dividing the two roots. So this was all about the principal fibers of the periodontal ligament. You need to know what principal fiber groups are, how many types of principal fiber groups are present within the PDL, and how are they arranged, and how do you see them on a section of the tooth. You also need to be very good at drawing this figure showing all of these principal fiber groups on the section of a tooth. Then comes the Sharpie's fiber. Sharpie's fiber, काफ़ी दफ़ा हमने ये टर्मिनोलॉजी सीमेंटम में भी पढ़ी है, PDL में भी पढ़ी, and then we talked about it in the alveolar bone as well. And every time I mentioned what Sharpie's fiber basically is. All of the principal collagen fibers of the periodontal ligament are embedded into cementum on one side and alveolar bone on the other side. And these embedded portions of the principal fibers is called the Sharpie's fibers. So the primary acellular cementum has fully mineralized Sharpie fibers, whereas the bone and the cellular cementum has partially mineralized Sharpie's fibers. Occasionally, these Sharpie's fibers, they pass uninterruptedly through the alveolar processes to continue as principal fibers of the adjacent PDL. It, however, happens when the process consists only of the compact bone and no Haversian system, which is not very common. These Sharpie fibers may also mingle buccally or lingually with the periosteal fibers that cover the outer cortical plate of the alveolar process. So, in this section of the tooth, if I draw the Sharpie's fibers, this part of the horizontal, the oblique group, and this part of the oblique group is Sharpie's fibers. The embedded part, the part embedded in the alveolar bone and the part attached to the cementum is basically the Sharpie's fibers. Sharpie's fibers sometimes pass through this alveolar bone and they cross the alveolar bone and they insert into the periodontal ligament or they become the part of the periodontal ligament of the adjacent tooth. लेकिन ये सिर्फ तब होता है जब cortical plates या alveolar process की जो compact bone है वो entirely compact bone हो, उसके अंदर कोई Haversian system ना हो, which is not very common. उसके अलावा ये outer cortical plate की periosteal fibers के साथ, periosteal fibers क्या होते हैं, basically periosteum is the outer covering of the bone. तो alveolar process की जो periosteal fibers होते हैं उसके साथ ये buccal और lingual side के ऊपर Sharpie's fibers mingle कर जाते हैं. So this figure basically shows the, let me get a highlighter. Oh, sorry. This basically shows the periodontal ligament. The embedded portion of the periodontal ligament fibers जो bone के अंदर embed हुआ होगा, that is called the Sharpie's fibers, जिसकी वजह से इस particular bone को भी bundle bone कहते हैं. और इसी तरह opposite side पे जो cementum के साथ attach हुआ होगा, तो that part of the cementum where these principal fiber bundles have embedded, those embedded part of the fiber bundles is called the Sharpie's fibers. So Sharpie's fibers have a very important function. Sharpie's fibers basically are helping the tooth attached to the alveolar bone, and it also helps the tooth against lots of forces on the tooth, and it also helps sustain the periodontal ligament space. Then we have another fiber system which is not entirely a part of the periodontal ligament, but these fibers maintain the integrity of the periodontium, the functional integrity of the periodontium. This group of fiber system or this group of fibers is called the gingival ligament fibers. These fiber bundles are obviously collagen fiber bundles, and they are present in the lamina propria of the gingiva. They're not present within the periodontal ligament entirely. They are majorly located in the lamina propria of the gingiva. Now, what is the lamina propria of the gingiva? If here you see in this figure, this is the tooth, this is your tooth, and then you have the gingiva covering your tooth, the soft tissue covering your tooth. The soft tissue that basically covers your tooth consists of the outer epithelial lining. This is your epithelium, and under the epithelium, the supporting connective tissue of the epithelium in the gingiva is called the lamina propria. So this light pink region, all of this is your lamina propria, and then here you have the alveolar bone, which this soft tissue is basically covering. So the alveolar bone is covered by the lamina propria, the supporting connective tissue, which is supporting the epithelium, which basically makes the lining of your oral cavity. And about this epithelium or the gingiva, we have a free gingiva and an attached gingiva. This basically is your free gingiva, which is not tightly bound to the tooth and the bone, whereas then we have the rest of the gingiva, which is tightly attached to the alveolar bone. This part is called the attached gingiva. इसको मैं A label कर रही हूँ और इसको मैं F label कर रही हूँ. The free gingiva and the attached gingiva. The free gingiva basically faces the part of the free gingiva that basically faces your tooth is divided into that part of the epithelium is divided into sulcular epithelium and junctional epithelium. The junctional epithelium is entirely that region where the epithelium, this epithelium is connected or attached to your tooth, whereas that region where the epithelium is not attached to your tooth and there is a space or sulcus in between that part of the epithelium, this particular region is called the sulcular epithelium. So the gingival ligament is a group of fiber bundles made up of collagen that are not a part of periodontal ligament, but they help maintain the integrity of the periodontal ligament, and they're present here in this lamina propria of the gingiva. And lamina propria of the gingiva is basically the supporting connective tissue of the epithelium. बिल्कुल वैसे ही जैसे हर epithelium को connective tissue support कर रहा होता है, यहाँ gingiva में भी connective tissue epithelium को support कर रहा होता है, and it is called the lamina propria. These fiber bundles are divided into 5 groups called the dento-gingival group, the alveolo-gingival group, the circular group, the dento-periosteal group, and the transeptal fiber system. The dento-periosteal group, the dento-gingival group, as the name says, is attached to tooth on one side, dento is for tooth, and is present in the gingiva, the lamina propria, on the other side. The alveolo-gingival is attached to bone, alveolar bone, alveolar is for bone on one side, and then it spreads into the gingiva, the lamina propria of the gingiva. The circular group circles the gingiva in circles. It forms a neck or a band around the gingiva. Then the dento-periosteal is embedded on the tooth on one side and periosteum of the bone on the other side. तो आधी चीज़ तो आपको इनके नाम से ही पता चल जाती है कि कहाँ से ओरिजिनेट कर रहे हैं और कहाँ पे जाके अटैच हो रहे हैं और कहाँ पे फ्रीली पड़े हुए हैं. Then we have a transeptal fiber system, and as the name says, trans, they cross whole of the arch. एक साइड पे cementum पे अटैच हुए हुए होते हैं और ये पूरा gingiva क्रॉस कर, पूरा बेसिकली PDL क्रॉस करके opposite साथ वाले दांत की, adjacent दांत की cementum में अटैच होते हैं, and that is how they connect the whole of the arch together. मतलब सारे दांतों की cementum को आपस में अटैच कर रहे होते हैं. So this is the transeptal fiber system. Talking about the dento-gingival groups. The dento-gingival group is the most numerous, and as the name says, it extends from the tooth dento is for tooth. Where on the tooth? From the cervical cementum. They extend from the cervical cementum and then they insert into the lamina propria of both the free gingiva and the attached gingiva. So this basically here is your tooth. Here, this is your crown and this is your root. So the dentogingival, the red ones are the dentogingival. They originate from the cervical cementum and then they insert into the lamina propria. This is the free gingiva, lamina propria of the free gingiva, and also the lamina propria of the attached gingiva. So these red things here are these red bands here are the dentogingival. The alveolo-gingival, as the name says, these fibers radiate from the alveolar bone, the crest of the alveolar bone basically, and extend into the lamina propria of both the free and the attached gingiva. So the green ones here are the alveolo-gingival. This is your alveolar bone, ये जो आपको नजर आ रही है. So the alveolo-gingival group originates from the alveolar crest into the free and attached connective tissue or the lamina propria. So these here are the green ones, these are your alveolo-gingival groups. Then we have the circular group. क्रॉस सेक्शन में सर्कुलर ग्रुप आपको इतना अच्छा नजर नहीं आता, आपको ये डॉट्स डॉट्स ही नजर आ रहे हैं, ये आपको लॉन्गिट्यूडनल सेक्शन के अंदर नजर आएगा. This small group of fibers basically forms a band of fibers around the tooth. They interlace with other groups in the free and the attached gingiva, and they basically help the free gingiva bind to the tooth. फ्री gingiva को बिल्कुल ही ये टूथ से अलग हवा में नहीं रहने देते. ये जो सर्कुलर ग्रुप है ये बेसिकली हेल्प करता है कि फ्री gingiva to some extent tooth के साथ bound रहे. So these yellow fibers that you can see forming a neck around the tooth, these yellow fibers are your circular fibers. These are your circular fibers. They are forming a neck around the tooth or a band around the neck of the tooth. They also interlace with the other fibers in the free gingiva as well, and they help binding the free gingiva to the tooth. Then the second last group is the dentoperiosteial group. As the name says, obviously extends from the tooth into the periosteum. These run from the cementum of the root over periosteum of the outer cortical plates of the alveolar process, and they insert into the alveolar process or the vestibular muscles and sometimes the floor of the mouth as well. So these blue bands here that you can see are the dentoperiosteial. They are originating from the cementum, because this is your crown and this probably is your root. So they extend from the cementum and they passed over the crest of the alveolar bone, over the outermost lining of your alveolar bone, and then they insert into the alveolar bone and the vestibular muscles or the floor of the mouth sometimes. So these are the dentoperiosteial groups. Then we have the last and the final type of the gingival ligaments, the transeptal fiber system, which is called the transeptal ligament. We call it the fiber system because it connects all of the teeth in one arch. These fibers basically run interdentally from one tooth to the next to next to next. They run interdentally from the cementum just apical to the base of the junctional epithelium of one tooth over the alveolar crest of that tooth, and they insert into the similar region of the adjacent tooth. And collectively, all of these transeptal ligaments form a transeptal fiber system of one arch, and they form an interdental ligament that connects all of the teeth in one arch. So these blue ones here that you can see, these are the transeptal. They originate from the cementum just below the junctional epithelium. This is your junctional epithelium. So they originate right beneath the junctional epithelium from the cementum. They pass over the crest. This is your crest of the alveolar bone, and then they cross the alveolar bone and get inserted onto the similar region of the adjacent tooth, and then they extend throughout the arch, and that is how they are connecting all of the teeth in one arch, and there they constitute the transeptal fiber system, or we call them the interdental ligaments, connecting all the teeth in one arch. Because these transeptal fiber systems or the transeptal ligaments connect all of the teeth in one arch, these fibers are a major cause of post-retention relapse of orthodontically positioned teeth. Now, what is orthodontically positioned teeth? Whenever we put an external force, therapeutic external force on the tooth to move them from one position to a new position, that movement is called an orthodontic movement or a therapeutic movement, because that is done therapeutically to change the position of the tooth. When you go to an orthodontic to get your teeth fixed, or get them in a new position or an ideal position, that movement which happens during that treatment is therapeutic movement of the teeth, or the orthodontic movement. And once you get rid of your braces or the orthodontic appliances which were actually moving your teeth into new positions, once you're done with that and the orthodontic appliances are removed, what happens is that these transeptal fiber system, or the transeptal or the interdental ligaments, they have a very good memory, and they have a lesser turnover rate as compared to the periodontal ligament. So these cells or these ligaments, basically, what do? They tend to bring the teeth back into their original position, and that is called relapse of the teeth, that the teeth are coming back to their original position. So basically, these fiber systems, as they're connecting all of the teeth in one arch, they cause a major problem of relapse after an orthodontic treatment has been done on the teeth. So this is an important point about these transeptal ligaments. And what happens when when a dentist or an orthodontist basically has moved one tooth quite extensively, और ज़्यादातर ये केनाइंस के साथ ही होता है कि वो बिल्कुल ही उसकी पोजीशन जो है वो चेंज कर दी या बिल्कुल रोटेट करके न्यू पोजीशन के ऊपर लेकर आ जाते हैं जब किसी दांत को, तो उस दांत के अंदर बहुत ज़्यादा टेंडेंसी होती है कि वो वापस रिलैप्स कर जाए आफ्टर probably 1 to 2 years of the treatment. तो उसको प्रिवेंट करने के लिए the orthodontic individual, what does he do? He cuts these transeptal ligaments so that particular tooth is not connected to the other teeth in the arch, and the transeptal ligament is no more there to tell the tooth where it actually started its movement from. तो post retention relapse को कम करने के लिए ये transeptal fiber ligaments से dentist जो है they get rid of this by surgically cutting them. ठीक है, so this figure here basically shows the alveolar crest. This is your alveolar bone, this is your crest of the alveolar bone, and here you can see the transeptal ligament running from the cementum of one tooth. Let me use a highlighter. Running from the cementum of one tooth over the crest of the alveolar bone to the cementum of the adjacent tooth. This is how the transeptal ligaments are attaching all the teeth in the arch. ये बिल्कुल continue होता है, सारी arch के दांतों को आपस में connect कर देता है. So this figure here shows the teeth on one side. You have the enamel here, and then you have the root part, This is your free gingiva and this is your attached gingiva. This is your periodontal ligament space, and here you have the alveolar crest fibers, the horizontal fibers, the oblique fibers, the apical group of fibers, the interradicular within the periodontal ligament. And within this lamina propria, we have the gingival ligaments, which are not entirely a part of the PDL itself, but they help maintain the periodontium its integrity because ये gingiva को healthy रख रहे होते हैं. These gingival ligaments are divided into 5 groups. We have the dento-periosteal, we have the alveolo-gingival, we have the dento-gingival, we have the circular group, and we have the transeptal group. Of these, the transeptal groups connects the cementum of adjacent tooth in one arch. It moves from the cementum of one root right beneath the junctional epithelium, crosses over the alveolar crest and attaches to the cementum of the next, and that is how it is attaching the cementum of all the teeth in one arch. Then we have the alveolo-gingival that originates from the alveolar crest and radiates into the free and the attached lamina propria. Then we have the dento-gingival that originates from the cementum on one side and then goes or radiates into the lamina propria of both free and attached gingiva. Then we have the dento-periosteal that also originates from the cervical cementum, crosses over the alveolar crest, and then it is embedded or attached to the alveolar process or the vestibular muscles or floor of the mouth. Then we have another group called the circular group that circles or makes a band around the neck of the tooth, and basically it helps attaching the free gingiva bind to your teeth. This is it about today's lecture. So far we've covered the collagen fiber system of the periodontal ligament. The collagen fibers of the periodontal ligament are mainly type 1, 3 and 12, and they are in the form of fiber bundles that are present within the PDL ligament space, and those fiber bundles are grouped as principal fibers, and we have 5 groups of principal fibers: the alveolar crest, the horizontal, the oblique, the apical and the interradicular. Then we talked about another group of collagen fibers which is present in the lamina propria of the gingiva called the gingival ligaments. They're also divided into 5 groups: the dento-gingival, the alveolo-gingival, the dento-periosteal, the circular and the transeptal. In the next lecture, we are going to talk about the other fibers of the periodontal ligament, the elastic fibers, which are the elastin, the oxytocin and the elastin fibers. The question and answer session for this lecture is going to be tomorrow, Thursday, 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to see you guys in the live session then. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.